All right, so we're live now. So as I was saying, Ginger, that we didn't really go over the sheet, but the sheet is really the most important part because if you make a model in Revit and you don't put it on paper, that model doesn't do anything. Granted, we are able to get a little bit more done with the Deluxe and the Twin Motion, and I understand that you still can get some stuff, but at the end of the day, it's all about those drawings. Those drawings need to be submitted to the general contractor. Those drawings need to be reviewed by engineers. There's all kinds of reasons, but at the end of the day, you have to get stuff on paper. So you'd notice on this template file, I don't actually have any sheets. So what you do is if you throw a sheet in, you create a sheet. And the neat thing about it, we can have different paper sizes, but I'm actually going to want to teach you how to make a border because you have to know how to make a border. It's this very simple family. That's something that we're going to get into real quick on this step 2. I think I wrote in the email a little bit at the end of September, we're going to be going into a step 2. The idea is that level 1 that I just drew of that building, which the roof then and the site plan, at an 1/8 inch scale, we're going to find it just fits on the sheet. However, if we've got to do that at a 1/4 inch scale, which typically for coordination drawings, that's exactly what you have to do. You see, it just barely fits on that border. Now, we would find out that it's got this little title bar that comes in with it, which you'll notice that this level 1 corresponds to the name here, which means, once again, if I name it here, now it gives you this question. Eric, you want to speak to that? Anybody want to tell her what that's doing, what that's saying to you? There's going to be several times where Revit's going to ask you a question. What I don't want you to be is so scared to answer incorrectly that you don't move forward beyond that point, because in the early days, that's where you'll get. Try to read it, and what it's saying is it's going to rename the levels. Okay? So that means that it's also probably going to rename the ceiling plan as well. Let's see if that's the case. We say yes, you'll see now I have a Brian's floor plan and a Brian's floor ceiling plan. But what it was actually telling me was now I have a level line that's named Brian's floor. Okay. So that's what that question was asking. Now, typically, we're going to get these levels all in correctly, and we don't want to do that. But what I was trying to show you is it also fixed the name of that view. Okay. So that now I've got a drawing. And at that scale, everything works good. Now, what Eric was worried about was the dependent view. So when you start getting something that's large, like the size of the casino, when we get a building like that and we go back to that sheet, now we're stuck with a predicament. How do we get that to fit on that sheet? We got to have a match line. Okay. You've seen drawings enough. Are you familiar with match lines? Which basically means I'm going to have an east wing and a west wing, or area A, area B. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. But what your objective is, and it's a little bit tricky, because right now, down here at my cropping is not set to be on. This one here says crop view, and this one here says show crop region. So I can't even see it, but there is actually a crop region there. Actually, there's not, but let's pretend there is. And that's the crop region. So I don't have a big enough piece of paper to fit this thing on. So that's where the dependent views come in. So this is where we duplicate as a dependent. You're really going to get this driven home when we give you a model and we tell you we need to set this up. So now you'll see that even though Brian's floor looks identical to Brian's floor dependent one, and what I do is I then do is what I typically do, what I've learned, and just to show Eric, is I found that now if I put Brian's dependent on here, here's what I can do is I can pull in this view. Now I double clicked in that view to activate it. See, I could pull all these things nice and tight, these elevation markers. If they're not that tight, they're not going to show on the drawing or on the sheet. So that's why I'm bringing them in closer. But the real thing that I'm trying to do here is this crop boundary. And you'll notice it looks a little bit different when you highlight it. There's actually two lines. The second one is an annotation. If you don't like that, it's right down here. It's called annotation crop. You can actually turn that off. You'll probably end up keeping it on because it's important. That way the tags go on the right view. But what we can do is we can now say, pull that crop boundary down to where the building is. I could take my view title, drag it up into place, and you're going to get to do all these clicks and drags because I don't want to see things. I want to see things as PDFs. Now we can make that a little bit better because one of the things that happens with a dependent view is the dependent view works very good with a match line. And then as well, we're going to show you another one that's going to be called a reference view. Okay. So what happens now is if I go back to Brian's floor, do you see how this crop boundary is here? That's the area I just drew. The match line is in here. So what happens is I can work on this floor plan. This other crop boundary out here, that's actually never used because what we do is we don't place this big one on the sheet. Okay, what we're trying to do is create these guys. So the next step that I typically do is I typically duplicate that dependent as a dependent. Now you would think that would be making a grandfather, a mother, and a child. But what it actually does is it just creates another child of that parent view. So now what you'd find is if I took that crop boundary and moved it over, and what I want to do is I don't want to move it beyond that match line. You see that match line? I want that match line to appear in both views. And the question is, does that fit on two sheets? Sure enough, it does. So what happens is now my first floor, we would end up taking that original view out. We'd put the Brian dependent one. You'll see how it almost comes close to fitting on the sheet. And what we'd want to do is name this guy. This time you're going to see that where I'm going to name it, it's actually a little bit easier for me to go here and say east, or I'm sorry, this would be the west side. And if you sit there and say, well, I don't know, should I make it east or west? My recommendation, go into this view, look at what this is named, and this guy is actually named. Where's he named? Right there, west. West. View name west. Okay? So the idea is some people will try to fight the way they'll say, oh, well, that's not how we do it. We think of that as the east. And you don't want to fight what Revit does. So part of what I'm trying not to fight is, do you see how things are spelled? How when Revit creates level, it creates it as a capital L, EVEL. And you'll end up finding that that's the case. So that's where some people say you should do it on all caps. Some people say they get lazy and they let it all undercase. But my recommendation is you should really get used to spelling things in what I call title case. Abbreviate the first letter and the rest of the letters are lowercase. But like I said, That's only because I learned why fight what Revit does naturally. Notice how when it created this sheet, it created as unnamed. Now, what we've just done is we've just named that guy West. And normally what I do, now granted, most architects, people, engineers, they'd want you to put something like floor plan or level or something like that. But and notice how that renamed it over here. So what I would then do is I normally take that view name, and if it's the only view on the sheet, I'm going to come over here to the sheet name, and I'm going to say paste that in, and it would be the same. Whatever that main view is and what the floor plan is. Now, as Eric and I were talking, it's really a challenge because you don't need to just learn Revit, you need to learn drawing standards. So can anyone tell me why it's a bad idea for me to take and make my whole view fill this sheet? Eric, you want to help on that one at all?
I mean, are you saying because the typical standards are to do 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever, and keep it that way? You don't want to use 3/30 seconds? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is we should really have a strip here.
Oh yeah,
here.
You got general notes, keynotes, all kinds of stuff.
Legend, yes,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We should keep an area where we can put the legend and the key plan and the symbols and maybe a schedule. You want to leave a little bit of room. It's a common mistake.
That's also not a great title block. I don't think.
Without a doubt. But with what we cover today, Ginger's going to have her a professional title block tomorrow. Okay? Because it's only going to take that long. Because that's where I wanted to show you. Let me finish the sheet up. So the next thing I would do, now here's the neat part. If I come in here and I name this A101, and this is where it works better if it's area A as opposed to east and west. See, if I was to say, oh, you know what would have been better? Instead of west floor plan, I would say area A plan. Now, if I did that, it's really a good idea for me to take that same information, and notice this time I'm going to put it over here just so I don't have to zoom out. I'm going to be putting it in there, and then I'm going to be putting it in here. Now, somebody tell me why I say it's better to go area A, area B, as opposed to east and west.
Because you're not usually looking at two different things. Oh, you're talking about that coding on the sheet. I got you.
That's why.
Usually you're looking at more than two segments anyways.
Yes. Well,
but yes, that helps.
Depending on the building. But the thing I was thinking of is what happens, Ginger, is now we've got one sheet. See it down here? Sheet name, what it is. When I go and make my next sheet, like I said, instead of me going create sheet, I have to create sheet so many times. I've added it to the toolbar up here. I say, okay. Now I drag this guy in. Okay. Notice that he's already named 201B. Okay. And if I name this 201X, watch what's going to happen. If I say make a new sheet, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be 201Y. And if I made this sheet 808, what's going to happen when I make a new sheet? It's going to be 809. And you want to leverage that to make that work, because you see how we got these sheets here? You do understand I created over 1,400 sheets for the project that we're working on. So everything you can do to make this thing go faster is going to be very important. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to try to decide how to break up a project, how to put it on sheets, And what we were talking about a second ago, I could go back to any one of those floor plans. Oh, I'm sorry. That was it, wasn't it? That's the actual floor plan. This was the one where it was placed on. What we would do is you can double click on the border, or you can say edit family. Now, Ginger, I need you to unmute and I need you to remind me what the heck you were taught about creating families. What commands should be in this create family? Do you remember the ones you would expect to see?
Commands. What do you mean by commands?
Remember, we could do an extrusion, right? What else could we do? Do you remember the names of the ones that we went over when we created that diffuser? We can do it a revolve. We can do a sweep. So my question then quickly becomes, where the hell is extrusions? I don't have those. And the reason being is we taught you how to build a 3D object family. This type of family is a 2D family. Okay. And even people like Mike, even myself, quite frankly, struggle with all the different kinds of families there are. What I want you to not be afraid of is a title block family is not that complex. It does not have the create extrusions. This is an object that you can only draw lines. You'll notice I can't even put in detail components, right? I can only do these couple little things. So there's not a lot you can do. And the big thing, what you want to realize, so Eric was saying, you're going to have this a lot smaller so that we can make some more room for the rest of our information. So I usually would be looking at taking about that much information. And I'm serious. I want you to try to go make a border. Go recreate that border and make it real tight. A lot of times people will turn that on its side, which feel free to do. I just want you to realize that one of the things that you get to do on a job when you're lucky enough that you're high enough up that you actually get to create the borders, you can be creative. All right. I'm not even going to use this stuff here. I'm going to take this logo, get rid of it. Maybe I decide, oh, wouldn't it be neat if I could create a logo? Well, I could draw myself a shape. And we're going to test you a little bit. Do you remember what I said about these sketch shapes? If I draw another circle inside there, what is that other circle going to do?
Create a hole.
Create a hole. And if I create another one, it would fill that one in. So I want you to get a little bit creative. Maybe even go so far as this. If I can draw one filled region, couldn't I draw two and have a nice triangle? And maybe that triangle, I say, oh, I only got one type of filled region. Well, maybe I'll just create a new one. Watch where I'm going here. I might say something like gray. And then I could take this guy and I could make him be a solid pattern of a gray color. And that's it. Okay? I'd like you to be a little bit creative with it. What I want you to understand is the only thing that's typically in the border is a little bit of text. And see, what we're going to do with this text, we don't like the size of it. So the way most people would have you do it is, oh, look, they got a smaller, they got a 3/16. So I could actually just take all these guys and make them go to a 3/16. Now, Do you see this box right here? That box is where it's going to wrap. Okay. So what I want to do is I actually want to move all this stuff over so it's about centered in there. And when I want to pick each one of these guys, I want them to go so that they're just inside that box. And then what will happen when I load this back into the project, you'll see my border got much smaller. My names, remember that name right there where it says unnamed? That actually comes from here. Control C, Control V. Well, notice I've got a problem. I didn't do anything about my sheet name. So if I go back to, that's always a lovely one.
I think you closed it.
No, I didn't. It's just a little dash, and it was too many of those across the top to see it. But good call. Let's see. This one, why does it not have the box? It's a label. It's pretty weird, isn't it? I bet I know why. No, that isn't the why. All right, these things that we're changing right now, Ginger, they're one of the two objects that you got to draw. You can put in text, where whatever I write in here, do not scale drawing. That would be on every sheet. That's a piece of text. Okay. As opposed to the other thing that you can put in, which is a label, which we played with a little bit when we were making annotation tags. So I'm not sure if you were there for that class or if you remember any of that. An annotation tag as well is a 2D family. So that's sort of why I wanted to reinforce what we'd already gone over. The other object you can put in is a label. And a label goes in that you click on the screen, and then this window pops up, and then we can put a parameter in. Okay, so if I wanted to say the sheet number or one of these parameters, I could very easily put that in. Let's do exactly that. We're going to have it say the sheet number. So we have the sheet number twice. You simply put it in. Now, if you wanted to put a bunch of information in there, you could put multiple parameters, or you could create new parameters. And you're not going to need to do that in the beginning. Now, that new one that I put in, you know why you don't see that box? Here's why. No, right there, I'll bet any money it's because that's transparent. I bet if you made that say opaque. No, son of a gun. This one has it. This one does not. This is one of those really weird things about a family. That's because that parameter has probably been around since Revit 1, and there's something a little bit weird about that one parameter, which is interesting. Could it be because that sample value? No, that wouldn't be it either. I'm going to have to look into that one. I'll get back to you. But the idea is you can either put in text or you can put in tag. When we load this into our project, what we're going to see is now we got a good sheet number. And you'll see we were able to put that in there. And remember what we wrote down here. You'll notice when I go to the other sheet, this has an A, but it has the same do not scale drawings. So the only thing you really have to do to create a border is put in labels and text. That's it. It'd probably be a good idea for up here for this logo for you to even play with putting a century one in there. Sometimes they like to have some notes. Blah, blah, blah. Maybe you want the home and office number. Maybe you want the subcontractor. That's what typically goes in a border. You have some borders laying around. You could go check them out. Okay. Well, what we're trying to do is leave ourselves some room so that we can put some text on these sheets right here, some general notes, like we said, key plans, vicinity plans, that kind of thing. So, dependent views. Input, Eric, Misty, Ginger, anyone?
That's pretty much what I wanted to make sure was understood.
Well, the way I think that that's best to be understood is going to be for Ginger to lay out about a couple hundred sheets. And I guarantee you, when she gets to the last one, and same thing for Tyler, I think if you set somewhere between 50 to 100 sheets up, I think you'll have the hang of it. I'm pretty sure. Understand, we could then, the way we would look at it, Ginger, we would then be looking at setting up the sheets that are going to be the north view, the south view, the west view, and the east view. And see, I would personally probably try to jam both of these on. You notice I do a lot of nudging when I set this stuff up. Maybe I even want to do it at a little bit larger scale. But the idea is now, since I've got enough experience that what I can then do is realize that I'm going to be putting a roof on this thing. That's why I gave myself a little bit more room. I'm going to go throw some doors and windows in there. I'm also going to be checking these levels out. So one of the things we can do, you're going to notice that I'm actually working in the sheet. So don't just think that we set these sheets up so we can communicate with other people. Actually, if you do a good job setting them up, you can actually do a fair amount of work. So let's get realistic. There's never a 10-foot floor to floor. If you're building 10-foot floor to floor, that's like on the casino. That means, or on the tower. That means there's no room to do anything. By the time you've got structure, you've got no room. So let's call that maybe 11. Actually, I'm going to go bigger than that. I'm going to go 14.8 because this is a big floor. Right? Notice how they all went to that 14'8" in all of my views. See, because that's how a level line works. It's affecting in all those. So what another thing, and if you've never enabled the crop on that view, if you've never turned the crop on, what you would find, can you see that little 3D? That's very important because what that 3D means, I want to do this so you can see it in both views, which trust me is not going to be easy because I got to get that little dot. What you'd find is if you look at the other view over here, notice how it moved itself over. See that one over here? And on this side, I need to actually stretch it out a little bit more. And the reason being, do you see how that fixed it in both views at the same time? Because they were 3D level lines. Okay, now, what does the other look like? Well, if I was to go into this view and I was to turn this cropping on, if I take this crop boundary and I strike that level line, what you're going to find is now when we pick on this level, it no longer says 3D. Oh, I need to cut just a little bit more. Hey, oh, Why would it not be doing that? Because the annotation crop's not on. You think, Eric?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure that's it. Now, when you go like this, let's see. I would have thought for sure when I cropped this view, yeah, it's not affecting those. I don't know why that one is. I would have expected that. Another one I got to do a little bit of research on. The idea is if we turn that to a 2D line, what normally happens is that crop boundary. Oh, I know why. I'm not too smart. Let's go back to there.
Is it
What
2D
is
or 3D?
no, no,
levels? Oh.
nope. Think about it. Think about it, because once I started thinking about it, that crop is not enabled. So if we looked at the view, you would actually see it doesn't say crop the view. So I could either click it here, crop the view, or here, crop the view. When I turn that crop the view on, now those grid lines, you see how they now say 2D instead of 3D?
I always have that crop on all the time, so I didn't know.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
putting stuff
But the gist of it is like in this situation here, when we're early in the project, if you're picking that 2D, you're not doing the same thing as this, which is in the 3D. Watch my top view when I get out to here. The top view, do you notice how the level lines came out exactly the same? So when we're first setting up a job, you really want to do that to the 3D tags. One of the things you can do then, so let's say you've already cropped your stuff, but now you want to move that level line a little bit more. What's a good idea is to turn your cropping off, grab the 3D guide, make that adjustment. You with me? Now it just made it to all sections and all the stuff, all your sheets that are related to that direction. And the way that that's working, Ginger, see, so if this is all true, what I'm saying is now, if we were to come into Brian's floor plan and we were to draw a section across this building, you would actually see that those level lines should be working pretty doggone good. See how they're, and what you want, if you're using the blue tag and the names on this side, I'll be honest, generally it's a good idea to edit that family right there. Now, remember when I told you to edit the border family? It wasn't really that big of a challenge because you just picked on the family and you say, oh, Brian, I can do that. I can pick on the family and come up here, and where the hell is edit family at? Okay. And that's going to be a real condition. What I'm trying to show you is this is when you have to look to the next deeper. I don't want to say the word level because it's a level line, but you need to look at the next deeper place, which is here, edit type. Okay. And what happens is we can see this is a 1/4 inch head. And what we're actually doing is a level head named circle. So if I took this information right here, Eric and I and Misty, we already know where to go for it. But if you were to come over here and say search and paste that in, what you would find is it's gone down all the way to the families, below the views, below the sheets, down to families, opened up annotation symbols, and it says right here's your level head circle. So if I wanted to switch that, I would come to here and say edit. And now I'm in a family, and this family's a little bit different than a tag, a little bit different than a border, but they're from the same grouping. In other words, it's a 2D. Notice how I can draw the same kinds of things as in the border. Now, what I typically do is I take both of those and I go make them left, and then I nudge those over to the other side. And then because I'm just really just a nitpicky person, whenever I'm working with other people's stuff or from the template file, I always go and I change my leader border offset to 1/64th. Okay. And what you're going to see is that annoying big box that's over them. It's going to make it much more reasonable. Okay. Still gives them a little bit of overlap, but now at least before you would find it's very hard to pick. Now, I will tell you, when you go into these families, it's a really good idea to do a VV, come to the annotation, and turn your reference planes on. Okay? Because otherwise, it's hard to understand where it's putting that information in from. This is where it's coming in from. So if I now load this into the project, you would see that now a floor would be on the other side. And then a person might say, what they typically say to me is they say, well, Brian, can't you draw a line out there? And I can. I don't think you're going to have any other line types. So I'll just let it be that one line type. So I'm not going too deep into this. Now, see how it's sort of getting hidden by the names? And that's what I want you to understand. This is where Revit comes in. Notice how quickly I just keep revising what I want till I get it to where I want it to be. And what I'm having here as a problem is this thing called opaque. When I set that to transparent, and as Eric told you, in some companies, they've never, sort of like your company, they say, oh, Ginger's not smart enough to make those families. We're not even going to let her do that stuff. That's not the way I think. Okay. My recommendation is you should be able to do everything, but depending where you work, at Eric's company, they were divided into 3 different groups. One of them was the ones who did the families. One of the ones who did probably sheets and text.
Dimensioning, just dimensioning.
Who did the sheets?
It was dimension. That was it. It was sheets were dimensioning and editing, or dimensioning and annotation, and then there was a family creation team, and then there was the modelers, which did the coordination. And trust me, if you had to spend 1 month or 2 or a year doing just sheets and annotation, you wouldn't make it. It sucks the life out of you.
I would imagine it would. So now what happens is I'd really just be working in here, and what we would do is we would find this is like trying to take those fundamental skills that I gave you and just sort of amp them up. So what happens is I'm going to go ahead and close all other views. I'm going to close these families. That was the border that I played with. This is the level line head. I could now go back to drawing my building, which most people wouldn't think. Now I'll show you why there's a little bit of a backward step here. So maybe the next thing that I'm going to do is put in a roof, and I'm going to go ahead and say define slope. I'm going to put a 2-foot overhang on it from the core. I'm going to highlight over top. Do you see how it's picking that one line? You got to start playing with tab. So I tab, and what happens is it's going to put that whole roof in. And now I could finish. And what you would see is if I went down to my elevations, I put my elevations on one of these. Oh, I did. Right there it is. So I could take these 2 views and delete them. I could go to this view, and you see why I was trying to give myself a little more space, right? That was why I was trying to give myself a little more space, because I knew I was going to come back and put this high roof in here. Okay. So you see how now at the same time I'm modeling, I was actually setting up my sheets. So if I go back here, I could now let's say I wanted to place a bunch of windows, but instead of doing it the way you would think, instead of drawing a wall, I'm going to come down here and do this storefront, and I'm going to say that this thing is going to be about 12 feet tall, and it's going to go right across here from there to there. And maybe we'll put a little bit down here in the corner. We'll get a little bit neat here. We're going to take that 6 foot, and then we're going to just go like this and say copy. And remember to look for the speedometer area. This area right here. See, one of the ones that's sometimes good is if I said multiple, I could just go way up here and type in 10, enter 10, enter 10, enter 10, enter 10, enter 10, enter. Right? And maybe we got a little bit more notice that when I go back to drawing a wall, it's going to remember what I was drawing. Okay, so it didn't go back to that other type of wall. It stayed at the storefront. And then you might put in a couple doors. Now let's go back and look at that elevations, which I should have named. Notice how all that information's been put in there. And by you naming it, then you see it names the elevations over here. Okay. Now, what else might you do? You typically wouldn't do this, but I could actually hover over this wall, hit tab, pick all those exterior walls, and turn them to this brick on CMU and watch what happens. We just put brick. Okay. Now, this is a typical. Remember, I came from a standard template, or your early days, you're not going to be able to make these look a heck of a lot better real quick. But one of the things I would probably do is I would say, you know what? Those walls, I think, notice how I went here to the brick? If I just simply went to that material of brick, wasn't scared of it, and said, you know what, I'd rather that be a gray color. Now you can start to get some depth. You can start to feel that building. But even at that, it's very dry. It's still very bleh. So what we might do is we might play with other things. Typically, I do most of my work in fine. I do sometimes play with these a little bit, but I would typically have most of my views set up to be fine. But we could make this shaded. And maybe for an early phase, when you're trying to show it to the people you're drawing that house for, that might help you out. Okay, they're giving you that color. But either with the color or without the color, I will tell you that if you go underneath here and you go to graphic display options, there is a thing, there are two shadows. There's a cast shadows and ambient shadows. And I want to look at the ambient shadows. What you're going to see is at very little effect when you're far out, but can you see how this front face that kicks out? I can actually see the building kicking out. Don't get me wrong. I'd love for you as well to be saying, well, what does it look like with this? Cast shadows. And those are harder shadows. And those shadows are determined by the sun. Okay? So what I always tell everyone, if you're going to do it by the sun, notice that right next to where I'm finding this turning shadows on, and it's a good thing for you to play with these because there's other things that we'll look at in a second. Okay, I don't typically use most of the other ones, but I don't want you to not play with them. The other thing I tell people is if you go to the sun settings and you do a still, nope, you do a lighting. What I typically do is I typically take this guy and I duplicate it. And I call this my elevations. Okay. And what I want to do is I want that sun to be very low in the sky and right behind me. Okay. So directly behind me would be 180. So I might say something like 165. High in the sky would be 90. Nighttime would be 0. So if I take that down to about 15 degrees, what it's going to do is going to put that sun right behind my back in the view. And you'll notice it casts a shadow going this way. Okay. That can then be used, honestly, on all of your views. So in this view, if we use that same shadows, we were casting shadows, and we got to make sure that the lighting says elevations. Now we get this shadowed effect. Okay. Now, typically for mechanical, most people aren't going to use that stuff. Turning on the shadows and things like that, that's typically more for the architect. But I will tell you, it does have a good effect. The last thing that I typically do with my shadows is I don't like them to be as hard as they are. Oops, I did the wrong one. If I go here to graphic display for that view, you notice underneath lighting, see here where it says shadows? I generally dial that back to barely under 20. Now you'll see that you just have this little bit of a gray. We can see that there's a step in the building. And in this case, maybe. So what we end up doing now is we decide, boy, Brian, that's really a pain in the butt, because now I got to go make all those changes on this one, and I didn't turn the shadows on this one. What you do is we look at the name of this guy as East. Right here he is, East. And we simply say, create template from view. And I would call this my elevations. And it's probably going to tell me there's one in there already. Nope, it didn't. Hold on, let me pull it over for you. And what it's going to do is it's going to copy all of these effects. So sometimes you do want to include the level, sometimes you don't. I will tell you, as you get better, you're only going to try to apply the things that you want to apply. Okay. But for right now, I'm just going to let that be. And what we're going to do is when we zoom out, we're going to find, first of all, things I want you to look at. You see how this is dark? And you see how this one has no shadows? Now, when I go like this, if I take all these views and I said apply view template, there would be my elevations, and all the views would then go with that gray. And as well, part of the problem I have here is I don't have very much break in that face. So what I'd probably do is I'd say, oh, you know what I'll do with that building? I'll go in here and I'll say back here what we're going to have. We're going to have 4 little notches cut in the building. Okay. You wouldn't think this, but if I go in here to the modify, you know what? We talked about most of the modify. We better cover the modify tonight. We will cover the modify with this last half hour. That's where you can't really modify anything until you guys start drawing some stuff. But what you would see is if I come in here to the split element, this is one that took me a long time to do. If I do this checkbox on delete inner segment, I can go pick, and it just removed that segment in between. Eric and Misty would probably tell you they may not still do that delete inner segment. Some people just
I
completely
just did
stay
it
away.
last week. I just
Oh,
did
you
it a
do?
couple days ago. Yep, I had to do stuff like that, and I did it.
It took
I
me.
use it all the time.
Awesome. Awesome. So here I'd probably need a couple doors. And I'm looking for some kind of double sliding. Now what we see is if we go back to those elevations, you see how those shadows are popping and letting you know what's actually going on? Here we'd see these walls that I drew, they were going up too high, right? So if you needed to know how high you wanted it to go, maybe what you do is you'd realize these all say unconnected. Maybe I'd take all of those and make their tops be going to level 2. Now they all just went away. So you can see, it really doesn't take that long to draw something, Ginger. Maybe this roof, what I want you to do, and this is what they don't typically teach you. I want you to play. Maybe I want the
Shoot.
5 to go.
I just finished my material library. I'm gotta hit save because it blew away.
Your stuff just crashed.
Oh yeah, it does that. That's why I always hit save before I hit material.
I told you that's because they got that asset manager for crossing the 2 screens. What version of the software are you using?
22, but it happens in all my softwares. It seems like all versions.
No. You got to go load the 22 and then load the patch.
Oh, okay. Really? Okay.
I remember them having a problem with that. Go get the patch off of the Autodesk website.
Okay.
Now, Ginger, one of the things that I was pushing in that last one that you weren't in, or no, you were there, is that the real power comes in the ability to put this brick on here. So if I was able to put, let's say this was going to be a standing seam roof. See how this roof only has one object? Well, I might just, oh, you know what? I'm going to insert. Sort of funny how they don't say top and bottom, where they do say interior and exterior. I guess they just assume it. I'm going to do that step that I did before. I hate to do it every time, but I'm going to duplicate. I'd call this standing seam. And what do I do now? I always take that and copy that. And actually, a better name would be roof standing seam. And then what I do is I check this box on. I say appearance. I always got to hit this thing here, and I duplicate. And notice how, because of this template, that it's actually named generic 10. And then I say, you know what I've always wanted is a nice hunter green standing seam roof, which you'll see that made it green. But then on top of it, I put a surface pattern in. And this is one that's very tricky. This is not a drafting, okay? There are people that will say, oh, look at that vertical. That looks pretty good. I'm going to use that. You'll see what happens. Because I promise you there's people out there that do this, that have done this, and don't know how to undo it. And we say, okay, and look at that hatch pattern on my roof. Notice how when I orbit, that's not how standing seam looks. Standing seam's supposed to go straight up the wall. What the heck is going on? What we would find is, if we went back to what we did last week, which was the managed materials, you'll notice I'm already on that roof standing seam. This is the culprit. And the problem is it needs to be a model hatch, at which case I would make a new one. Guess what? Control V. Oh, cool. I already have that. And we would say the spacing is 2 foot with a 90 degree. If it ain't 90, it's going to be 0. Let's see what happens. And now all of a sudden, it looks like a standing seam roof. Now all of a sudden, I mean, Ginger, you have to understand, in CAD, how long would that take you, Eric? How long would have that taken you? I mean, we got quick at it, but it still would have been a half a day's work.
Yeah.
And especially when we start adding the additional details. And then remember that part of what I'm trying to do is these things here. When you do these for an architect, what generally happens is, I'm just going to pull this graph boundary up a little bit for me. Is what this is missing is nothing more than all we annotate a material. Okay. Now, obviously, because it came from the template, it needs a little bit of work. It needs a leader head put on it. And on top of that, this one didn't come out. Why didn't it come out? Well, if we pick this guy and we say edit the family, because I do not want you to be afraid of these families. Okay. I want you to get to learn. They're really just a bunch of 2D families, a bunch of 3D families, and then a couple really freaky families, mostly for structural panels and a couple different things. They're just a little and fittings and accessories for mechanical and plumbing. Those are definitely extra work. And part of the reason they're hard to work with is because for some reason Autodesk always turns this stuff off. So now I can see, first of all, I should be what? Number 1, I would rename this guy. I'd make it 164th. I would make it be not center, but left. And I'd slide it over because I turned those green things on. Okay. Now, what it's doing is that label is calling the material description. Where what if I told it to do the name? And you, in all honesty, you can actually do the name and the description. And let's see what ends up happening. You're going to see this one says roof standing seam. And this one says brick, common brick. That makes sense? And all this is a little bit of annotation. Let's see if they've actually even given you this one. And see what people start thinking is, I think everything is a doggone keynote. But if you are actually using what's in here, right? What happens when I hit this? I could go put a better material on that for the material name. How would I do that? I'm going to do a couple tabs so I can get that piece of curtain wall. I'm going to go to edit type. And what we're going to see somewhere in here is going to be the material. See where it says material glass? And I'm just going to make that said soda lime glass. And I might make something like curtain wall. Or whatever your architect or engineer. And all of a sudden, instead of you putting in a bunch of text, because you could do that exact same effect, Ginger, by simply going to text, going to this, and now I could do this and this and this and type, and this and this and this, and type, right? Where you could say, oh, well, what's the difference? Why is one better than the other? It's going to be mean to me. There it is. And the reason is because now you could go to any view at any time and go material tag, and you would have all those proper notes, right? See, once you've done it once and fixed it the one time, now you can do all of your sheets, and all of a sudden we can do a working set of drawings. Does that make sense? Questions?
Makes
How far?
sense.
How far have you drawn your house? You know I'm mad at you, right? You never shared your screen. I clearly said share your screen, Stinky.
I couldn't get my thing was being so slow. I don't know what was wrong with it.
I think it's the operator.
No, it kept locking up on me every time I tried to move anything.
Were you in the plumbing file? Or just in Revit?
Just in Revit.
Are you on your work computer right now, or are you on another computer?
Work computer.
But you can do a save.
Yes.
Can you show, is it just that you can't share the screen?
No, I could share the screen. It just wasn't. Every time I clicked anywhere, I'd try to drag the screen, move the screen, anything. It was whirly-gigging on me.
You know what? You're probably looking at the wrong screen when you're doing that. That's when I typically have that effect. In other words, if you're not working on the Revit screen and you're actually looking at the StreamYard screen, that's what feels like you're working in Marshmallow. Typically. So in other words, as I'm sitting here right now, I've got two screens that look identical to each other. If I try to work on the one that has the green border and has the little duck in the corner and the word rogue, then it feels like you can barely get anything done. If I'm looking at the actual Revit screen, it should be working. My question to you, how far are you drawing your house? Are you just trying to do the plumbing for your house?
No, I've been playing with it.
You've been playing?
Yeah, but you got to remember, I had 2 months to play with this thing.
I know, you should have built a whole neighborhood in that amount of time. Giving you a hard time. Everybody needs a little bit of a hard time sometime.
Yeah, I probably do need that.
You do need a little bit of a hard time. And just feel bad for poor Goofy, because he's really gonna have it bad. So why did that show that roof? That must be because the view range is going all the way up to level 2, as opposed to if I brought that thing down and said maybe minus 4 feet from level 2. That should take that roof away, no? Why would I be seeing that roof? Got any ideas there?
What are you in?
Are you in mechanical view?
No, I'm in an architectural view.
Did you change your cut plane?
No. It's on Brian's floor. It's going up to 7'6".
Oh, underlay.
Why is this? Oh, because I'm in a ceiling plan. Tell me you never did that. Tell me you never did that. I dare you to tell me that's never happened to you.
Me?
It's happened to all of us, right?
I've never worked in a ceiling plan.
Oh, you never worked in a ceiling. I hear you. Smart.
Yeah.
So really now, what I wanted to cover was the one that I sort of forgot, and that's what we're going to call a contextual menu. And that should pretty much run us out. We're going to probably maybe even cut out a little bit early. How hard is it for you to get time in? When do you think you're going to start to get time in, Ginger? When do you predict things are going to slow down a little bit? Because I would imagine before long, you're going to be mobilizing and out of there.
I thought things were slowing down, but everybody decides to change their tax forms and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So probably still a couple more months.
Now I'm trying to sneak some in and trying to go out and play with the Deluxe some.
Well, that's good. That's good. That was something that I definitely tasked you for. And like I said, I definitely think that it was cool that you did the augmented reality. I I was thinking about trying to come up there again. Who knows? I may just do that. So and
Well,
have take me out in the field. Go
I
ahead.
did a video. I screen recorded
Uh
when
huh.
I did it, but I thought it was too big to send to you. But I
So
can try.
you would post that up on my on that drive where you download the files, that Google Drive. You can put it up there.
Ah,
That would be awesome. That would be
that'll
awesome. And
do that.
I do know they want to help us. And I do know that they would really like to try to implement it. And to be honest with you, they have set up the Deluxe with a thing called a sandbox. They like to call it a sandbox, like you sort of an area to play, so that we could take these other jobs and put them in the Deluxe, which is something a little bit out of the normal. They definitely are interested. And when I get back from Montana, I would love if everybody's interested in developing that Deluxe model for a facilities management model. I'm telling you, it would be a bunch of work. And I do definitely think we could sell it to the client. Now, we might have to sell it through Century, but that's besides the point. I don't think that that's really going to be a problem. The question is, do we want to put that effort into it? So I need you all to do a little bit of soul searching and looking at your schedule and thinking whether or not we want to try to sell a facilities management model. But the last thing that I wanted to get into was when you pick an object, you see how this, whatever this bar looks like, we were on annotate, maybe you are on architecture. The thing they added was when you select an object, a contextual menu comes up. That means it's basically the modify comes up. But notice it says modify, and then it says walls. And notice these are things that apply to walls. Okay. So if I picked on something else, you'll notice that it says modify doors. And these are the things that can happen with that door. We could edit that family, or we could pick another host. We could say, oh, I don't want it in that wall. I want it in this wall. Now, most people would say, well, Brian, why the heck didn't you just go like this and create similar and delete the one you don't want? Wouldn't that be easier than pick new host? Eric, Misty, you know why we want to pick new host? You want to tell everyone why we would pick new host as opposed
dimensions or notes already tagged to those things?
Well, the door schedule. It might might already have a door number for the door schedule. Yep. There's that piece of equipment. It's never a good idea to delete the equipment and put another piece of equipment in, because if there's any intelligence in there, in this case, we're talking about this mark number right here, it's better conserved by doing a pick new host. Okay.
Gotcha.
But what we're after is we got cut to clipboard and copy to clipboard. I'm hoping I don't have to explain the difference between those two for you. Another thing that it did is this match. So like we could match. So we had another wall, and let's make this wall be just one of these weird ones. Oh, not that weird. How about we just do it generic? We can then go to the match command, match the object, and match the object. And you see what it did? Is it changed it to, and you can do that with tags, you can do that with dimensions, you can do that with all kinds of stuff. So that's the match. The copy and paste, that copy, the one that's a little bit weird if you're coming from AutoCAD, when we do a copy, the paste is a little bit weird. You've got paste from clipboard, aligned to a selected level, aligned to the current view. That's typically the one that I use. Aligned to current view, aligned to the same place, and aligned to a picked level. Okay. Those other ones will eventually show you that if you have a 5-story hotel, you might say, I want this same bathroom on floors 3 through 5. That's what the paste align to selected levels. We would pick which levels. If we had a lot of levels, we could copy it to all those levels. The coping. The coping is sort of funny that they've left that on there, because now they've added most of that stuff into steel, right? And the structure. Do they have coping? Yep, they have the same coping probably right here. Interesting. We don't need to talk about it a whole lot. There's usually a coping and remove coping. Those were the original commands. Like I said, I think they might have just duplicated that in the other one. But it's funny because they call the one cope, or they call them both cope, but the image is a little bit different. And how do you remove it? You don't have remove. I want that cope must be a different one. That is weird. Nope, it is the same. It is the same. All right. So we don't need to get into that. Now, here's one that's funny. This command is cut to clipboard, and this command is cut. Okay. Now, one of the things that most people don't know that you can do is if I drew one of those goofy walls, and that's not what I wanted. I actually wanted this wall to cut through the other one. You would find I could actually cut this object, then this. No. You must have to remove that joint, I'll bet. You would have to unjoin these two geometries, and then you would have to pick this guy, and you could actually cut. Oh, it's going to prove me into a liar. I guess because they're both walls. If I had another object, I could actually use the one object to cut the other object away, but obviously it doesn't work with walls. But the join does work. I don't know that I want to get deep enough to try to explain how it's actually doing all that cutting. We'll save that for a more advanced class. Let's go through the rest of the modified. Just understand, cut and join. When you start getting those to work, you're really cooking with gas. This one is about beam joins. That's for structure. This one here, roof. Join and unjoin a roof. I am going to show you that one. Okay, so if I was to go to maybe my site plan where I can see that roof, and I was going to draw myself in another roof, I like it for level 2, and I was just going to go like this and say that these two lines here don't define a slope, and finish that and look at that in 3D. See what I did out there is I made this little canopy covered area. Well, the whole reason I was doing that, because if you realize you got that roof join right here, join unjoin roofs, you can pick this back edge and pick this roof, and you see it put that right in there. And then maybe I come in here, maybe I move that up a little bit and put some canopy or some columns underneath it. But you see what it did was it allowed me to make that roof go back and hit that intersection. And it's sort of funny because if I keep moving it up until it misses that other object, it'll do something you're not expecting, which is where it doesn't hit that roof, it's going back to my original location. But most people don't realize that about roofs until they're really far in, and we would definitely have a specialty roof class where we got to try to create some real weird roof conditions. For now, just trying to get you through all of this geometry in 15 minutes. This one here, wall joins, what that's really talking about, if I went back to this thing here, what happens is people have a hard time when these two walls join, how they're actually joining. And I'll be honest, I don't think this is normally the answer. Normally what I tell people is, if it's not joining correctly, re-break the wall, right? And try pulling them down in the see, because that's a perfect example. Those two walls now got themselves joined, which means this is probably going to be weird. What I tell people is all you got to do is play with the order that you've done that joining in. Okay, see, so now you notice I'm not using that wall join command. All I had to do to fix what I wanted it to do was drag them in different orders. I don't use that one a whole lot. This one here is called split face. Let's say we decided that there was going to be a plaque with a concrete. Now, once again, I don't typically recommend the split face and the paint, but it's good to know they exist. Split face, what you end up doing is we pick this face. We're then allowed to draw on that face. And maybe I'm just going to do like this. And we say finish. And then the split face really works nice with the paint command, in which case I can come back in here. I can hope that there was some concrete somewhere. Let's see, concrete. And I could then paint that area. Now remember, because of how those things are working, this view, nope, it's the south view. That would all be driven by the material tag. See how it's called glass curtain wall? I must have put the wrong material on that thing. How can that possibly be that way? Not going to worry about it. They must have shared their assets or something. Something weird is going on there. But the idea is you can paint surfaces. This surface, then that split face, if I pick it, I can actually move that around. Most people don't know that. I could double click on it and I could change it. Maybe I took this and maybe I drew a line, an arc from here to here. Yeah, I definitely painted it with the wrong material. Under modified paint, sure enough, I picked the glass where I was trying to get the concrete. Right? While you're doing that, this is a good time for me to go over one that I didn't get on the early rounds. And that is any wall. Let me not double click on it. If you double click, it'll automatically do this, and that is edit profile, which turns it into purple, which you remember the rules about extrusions. If I was to take and do this, it's going to put two holes in that wall. And if I was to edit that profile and delete this top line, and maybe we do a nice tangent arcs. Now I can create this weird shaped wall like it was a jungle gym or something like that. That's edit profile. If you ever want to go back, you just say reset the profile and you'd go back. That's not actually on the modify. That was a contextual for a wall, but I did want to show you the edit profile. All right. So that got us all the way to this one is demolish. This has to do with if this wall was not part of the new construction, but it was part of the existing construction. What that thing here does is as long as I'm in a newer phase, I can demolish it. And what this view is doing is this view is showing me show all, which is showing you the things that have been demoed. So maybe there was a wall in the site that needed to be demoed. If we change this from show all to show current or show complete, you would see it would be, I actually demo that wall out of the project. That's what demo's for. That's what makes Revit so strong if you're using the existing and new construction phases. Okay. Don't know that we played with align very much. The align would allow you to do something like maybe I wanted to align this thing with this edge. See how it brought it down there? Then maybe I want to do align the bottom face. Notice I'm going to hit tab and it's going to grab that bottom face, and then that would drag it right down to the bottom. Align, offset. Offset, believe it or not, you can actually use on pipes. You can also use it on walls. Where you can also use it on lines and other things. What I'm after is if I went to offset and I said I wanted to offset that wall, I need a corridor going down there, so it's going to be 3 foot, and I hover till I get that line and then hit tab. Oop, I'm sorry, one click in white space, then hit tab, you would find I could align, I could offset all of those walls. Okay, offset. Mirror. Mirror, this one here allows you to draw a line that you're mirroring it around. See, I drew that at a little bit of an angle, didn't mean to. Let's try right here. If it's mirrored around this one, you see now there's 2 walls. And then the other one is the mirror around an object, where we take this guy, mirror him around there. Where did it go? Did I do that? Oh, I pick this guy, I say mirror, and then I mirror it around. The split with a gap. Move, copy. I think I showed you earlier tonight with copy. And generally what we want to do is we don't want to pick the buttons first. What we want to do is pick the objects that we want to copy, and then we pick the copy command. And you'll notice it remembered that I was doing multiples. So that means if I started doing it, it's going to keep waiting for me to keep doing this until I hit escape. As opposed to if I go to copy and turn that off, that multiple off, now it's just going to be one copy. Obviously, select a bunch of objects. This one here is delete. This one here trims both lines together. This one here just trims the second line. So some people end up trying to do that instead of using the other command. And then the last one is pick this line and go 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's your extends and your different versions. We pick these 3 walls and we say delete. We pick these 2 walls, and people like to sometimes pin this stuff. Eric and Misty would tell you I'm not too keen on it. And what you need to remember is you might say, oh, I want to pin this because I don't want anyone to accidentally change it. That's not how the pin command works. So I'm going to show you that, yes, indeed, if it's pinned and I tried to do a delete, it would say you couldn't do that. If I went in there and picked both of those objects and I said move, it'd say, nope, you can't move them. So you would pretty much now say, Brian, it sort of seems like you can't do anything with them. Well,
They're okay.
If I work these guys here, I could change them both to generic, and it didn't tell me anything about it being pinned.
Oh. Yeah, and the
Okay.
elevation too. Yep, going up
Yes.
and down.
Exactly. So pinning doesn't completely lock them down. This one here This is the one where we type in BX, and we actually have played with that a little bit. So that means if I was to click on that, it would show me just that one wall, right? So if I went back and turned my section box off, and I was saying, let's see this guy here, this curtain wall out here, I could work on just that curtain wall. Now I might decide that, I wonder if that contextual menu will pull up, does not pull up the add grid lines. Remember, underneath architecture, we could add curtain grids, right? Maybe add like this every other one or every two, so that I get myself a little bit of a pattern. That's how that curtain grid ends up working out with that particular type of curtain wall. And believe me, we will get into curtain walls. That's going to be one of the first things Eric and I tackle a little bit, see how we can do framing. So we now covered basically all the way out to here. We were covering this guy. What is this one? Override graphics in view. Did you even know that? And hide in view. I didn't even know those two were there.
Did I?
I would bet that we probably would do this. We would do a hide in view or override graphics in view. That's what those two buttons are. I'm not going to get into this displace elements. Make some pretty cool views to sort of show extra detail, but very few people have mastered them. But sometime if you wanted to do something, I'd be glad to help you with it. And then the last one we got is this line work. Ooh, buddy, you ever do the line work?
That's nightmare.
Yeah. So let's say the architect tells you, well, I want the roofs to be a little bit bolder on my elevations, right? Let's see, go to these elevations. And they say, oh, but Brian, this line here should be very bold. You can. I don't recommend it. I don't think Eric recommends it. But you could go edit line work and say, this architect wants this line to be heavy and that line to be heavy and that line to be heavy. And you can waste oodles of time.
Oh my gosh, they can.
Hey, Mikey,
Oh,
you just got home?
yeah.
Well, we'll get that other one tomorrow night. Like I said, I doubt very highly that Cody's going to be in a big rush for it. If he is, it won't take that much time. We're about to wrap up. We covered all these modify commands, and we showed Ginger how to put stuff on sheets. So it's time
Nice.
for her to get started on a job.
Cool.
So we were right here at the edit line work. This one here, I don't ever measure between two references. I just use a dimension. Or really, in all honesty, what I would typically do if I wanted to know how far it was from this wall to that wall, I would go in and I would say annotate, and I would draw a detail line, snapping at the one, snapping at the other, because that then allows me to pick this and pick that number right there and copy that number. That's the actual distance from there to there. Okay. But I'm sure you could use the modify or the measured distance between references, but I typically do this one. Let's say, remember how we were drawing this entrance at the back? Let's say we wanted to take all of that. We could group that where we might name it the entrance, and then that would then allow us to be able to copy this group, and we would end up with that same exact group. Remember, you would still have to go back to your split element with the delete inner segment off, and you would still have to clean that back wall, but now you can put some extra entrances on the back of that building. Let's see, tab. We're going to need unpin and delete. All right. So if we do all that, you can see now your sheets are actually not looking too bad. Obviously, we put that big overhanging canopy, which maybe we just make that, let's see, not near as big. How about if I go to the 3D view, go to this top view, double click, and just pull this guy back in here. Now you're going to find that that elevation sheet probably doesn't look too bad. Still a little bit of an overlap. But as I said, Ginger, it's really about you being able to put the stuff on the sheet. If you just model it in Revit, that's not getting the project done. Not if you're designing, and not if you're doing BIM coordination. It's got to hit the paper. Anybody? Mike, I apologize. If you don't mind, it's 9 o'clock, and I promised my daughter that I would play something called Monopoly Deal or whatever, Monopoly card game.
Yes, sir.
Ginger, questions, comments?
No, I don't think so.
All right, go get something to drink for tomorrow night. But everybody who's going to attend, I recommend we drink tomorrow night because I think we should celebrate. We covered a lot of information. That modify tab was one that we did leave out.
Well, you guys have a good night.
All right, Mike.
Night.
You too. Call me tomorrow if you want to set that sheet up. Otherwise, we'll do it tomorrow night.
All right. Sounds good, man.
All right, Ginger, we'll talk to you. I appreciate you coming. Eric and Misty,
guys.
Misty's gone already. Thank you, guys.
All right, later.